I have so many thoughts, and now I gotta remember what they are. Yikes. Hello everybody, my name is Kelsey, and we're about to get very, very nerdy with my March wrap-up. March was a pretty decent month as far as reading goes. I was able to get through 15 different books. I finished some series that I loved. I did a couple of different reading vlogs throughout the month. I've discovered some new favorites. Like, it was overall a really, really good reading month. So let's just dive right into the stats. Like I mentioned, I read 15 books, and that was over 5,361 pages and about 134.5 hours listened. And that was 2 audiobooks, 3 physical books, and 10 mixed. Our age categories were relatively spread out this month, unlike with previous months. We had 1 middle grade, 5 YA books, 4 new adult, and 5 adult books. The genres were pretty normal for me. We had 1 nonfiction, 6 romance, 7 fantasy, and 1 mystery. And the ratings, pretty normal for me as well. We had 3 5 stars, 8 4 stars, and 4 3 stars. The first book that I ended up picking up was actually a rollover from February. It was supposed to be my nonfiction for February, but I finished at the very beginning of March, and that is We Too, Victoria and Albert, Rulers, Partners, and Rivals. And this is by Gillian Gill. This is one of the books that I was hoping to get to in February because it was supposed to be kind of like a romance of sorts in my nonfiction romance, if I could get kind of any kind of romance for nonfiction. And it didn't quite work because it's not really about romance. I mean, it is, but it isn't. So I ended up giving this one 3.5 stars. I enjoyed some aspects of it and also felt like it dragged on so long. So this book is exactly what it sounds like. It is a nonfiction that follows the story of Queen Victoria and her husband, Prince Albert, in their time as rulers, and just really their relationship and how that worked. And I thought it was laid out in a very interesting way because the first section followed Victoria and her growing up and her upbringing in the sense of like until they got married and her first kind of thoughts on Albert. Then the same thing, second section was Albert, except for it was his upbringing all the way up until right about when they got married. And then the third section was like the biggest section of the book. The first 2 were kind of like a fourth of the book, and then the second one, let's say, is like the second half. And it was once they got married, their relationship as rulers. And it was interesting because it was at a time when, you know, women were thought of as property for the men. So the fact that she was queen was really bizarre because she was like the head of the country, but at the same time, he was the head of their family. So it was this weird back and forth of who's actually running the country, because for a long time it actually was Albert. He did a lot of things under basically like saying that it was Victoria's ideas, but it was him carrying them out, and it really was just him doing the stuff that he wanted to do, saying that he could because of Victoria. And Victoria loved him so much that she didn't want to cause any issues, so she just kind of went along with it. And so they were married, I think, for a relatively shorter period of time. I mean, they were together for a long time. They had like 9 kids together, and it followed her journey from wanting to really just be a married couple and not have kids right away to the fact that she had so many kids back to back to back, and she really, really hated being pregnant. Just like the whole pregnancy, whole early term. Actually, she wasn't like the best mom either, but she was okay once they got a little bit older. I thought it was really interesting because what we really know about this couple is not a whole lot. It's a lot of what, you know, the viewers or the community knew of them. So a lot of their private life was hidden. And then at the same time, you had this woman who declared how much she was in love with this man, and then once he died, she went in mourning for like 10 years. Like, she didn't wear any colors ever again. She only really wore blacks and grays and brown, dark browns and things like that. And she didn't go in public and kind of be seen in public for a very long time because she was just so distraught. And so that's the kind of view of their marriage that we had. And then you see this view where it was there's a lot more to it. She really didn't have as much of a say in the country as, you know, we thought. And then once he passes away, she was able to do a lot of the things that she wanted to do. But it took her a while to get into that role. So it was really just interesting to see her attachment issues that she had with people, because once Albert passed, she needed to attach on to somebody else. And so I just thought it was really interesting because we saw this really Victoria, but also just like the two of them in a very different light. So I felt it interesting, but it also just kind of dragged forever. Like by the time I was halfway through, maybe a little bit more than halfway through, I was like ready to be done, and it just kind of kept going. It was very, very repetitive near the end, and I just got very kind of tired of it. The writing was really accessible, which was interesting for nonfiction, so most of this was okay. I think it was just, the book is not a particularly long book, but it still needed to be a little bit shorter. The next two books are part of a reading vlog that I put out at the beginning of March, which was my You Recommended books, so the 12 books within 12 months series, trying to read one book a month that is recommended by you guys. So I'll leave that linked above if you'd like to check it out. I have the first book that I read in this, I read back in, I think, the beginning of February, so I've already talked about that one. But the next two, or the other two books that I read, the first one being Jewels of the Sun, the very first book in the Gallagher and Ardmore trilogy by Nora Roberts. I am to be giving this one 5 stars. I fell in love. This is a new obsession of mine. The tension between our characters is phenomenal. This series follows basically these 3 siblings. They're Aiden, Sean, and Darcy. So each book in the series is going to follow a different sibling within that family. This one follows Aiden, although it's not from the perspective of Aiden. It's from, well, I think it's actually third person now that I'm thinking about it. But it really follows Jude. Jude is an American who comes to this little town of Ardmore in Ireland. Her great-grandmother, I believe, has a little cottage there, and she and her husband recently got divorced, and she is just kind of like, I think she's like a PhD professor, if I'm correct, in mythology. And so she basically comes to Ireland to get away. She's tired of the monotonous life that she has lived. She really doesn't like the job that she does, but it's a sturdy job. It's one that brings her a lot of, you know, financial security and things like that. So she basically takes a hiatus, goes to Ireland to try to figure out what's going on, and in doing so, at the same time, she's trying to write a thesis about Irish mythology. And so she runs into this pub, which is the Gallagher pub, and it is run by Aiden. Now his siblings help out, so we meet all of them, but it is really run by Aiden. He and her strike up a friendship very, very quickly. He knows a lot of the tales of the town because he's always lived there, and so he kind of is sharing these mythology tales and is like the storyteller for her book. And so as they meet up for him to tell her stories, obviously more blooms from that. I love their scenes. The chemistry between them is amazing. Aiden is like so funny, flirtatious. Like he's got all of those like wrapped in a perfect package, yet also is like one of the most caring people I've ever read about. The romance itself is very quick, which these books are not particularly long, so it makes sense that it would go a little bit quicker. So some aspects of it, how fast they fall, of how fast she falls, let's just say, is maybe not as realistic as some other romances that I've read, but I very much enjoyed it. There's something about her writing that confuses the crap out of me, because I get sucked into her books. And this is the second book that I've really read by her, but I get sucked in so quickly. But there's still something about the writing style. I don't know if it's because, I think it's, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm pretty sure is third person. And there's something about that that makes it very detached as a reader reading this book, but it still works. Like nothing about this writing style should work for me, and yet works perfectly, and I love every second of it, and I get really sucked into these stories. The fact that mythology plays a big role in this, the fact that it's set in Ireland, and she is in this cottage, and she has these beautiful walks that she can go on, this beautiful forest behind her. There is some fantastical elements to it, so it does have a maybe magical realism lean. I wouldn't say it's full fantasy because it's not, but it does have some magical realism elements to it, which makes it a little different. And so you've got that, but just honestly, the way that she describes the area is just stunning. And I think Ireland and Scotland are some of the most beautiful places on the face of the planet that I would very much like to go and visit. So I loved this story. I loved seeing them. I'm now hooked on Nora Roberts. I've gone down the rabbit hole and looked at all of the series that she has written and pinpointed the ones that I want to read. There's quite a few of them, but this is another one that I want to get through because I love this romance, and seeing the characters that I know that we're going to follow and the love interest, we've been introduced to all of them, is I'm excited to see where this is going to go in the future. But at the same time, we have Jude, and she's coming into her own. She's done one thing her entire life, and it's not working for her, and she realizes it's not working for her. So this trip to Ireland really is her finding herself in her 30s. And the fact that, you know, we have that plot line, and then you have the romance plot line, and they do kind of intermingle a little bit, but the romance, like her finding herself, the romance helps it, but it's not the reason that she finds herself. It's not like, oh, I found myself in somebody else. It's, I found myself, but I also found somebody else. And so I loved that element of it. I loved that it's not all wrapped up in the fact that she has now a new person in her life. It's more that this person has helped her become more her. I just loved that element of it as well. And I just loved seeing her discover what she wants to do with her life and do it, you know, and then find friends. She's never really had friends before that she can just go hang out with. And Darcy and one of the other girls, Brianna, I think is her name, they become really, really close. And they're so different, yet all of them become like really important to each other. So I loved this book so much. So great recommendation. The next one I read was also part of that vlog, like I mentioned, and that is a 5 centimeters per second. This story is by Makoto Shinaki, and the art is by Yuhiko Seki. This is very confusing. I gave it 3.5 stars. It's been a while. It's been a good, like, this was beginning of the month that I read this. It's been quite a few weeks since I've read this, and I am still confused on what happened. Yes, not really. I mean, like, I know what happened, but like, I think this book, okay, so let me clarify this. The back gives you zero information about this book, but basically it follows these two people who grew up together. They were really close when they were in this is set in Japan, I believe. So they were really close in their version of like elementary school. And then when they went off to, I think it was like middle school, I can't remember exactly how the grades work here because they're a little bit different than they are in the US, but like junior high, I think, she ends up moving away. And so he becomes close with somebody else. But it really just follows the two of them as they have become separated by time and how they have impacted each other from childhood. And I expected it to be one thing. I thought going in, the plot was going to be something very, very specific. I thought it was going to be a love story. I thought it was going to be following a very specific couple, and it doesn't. It takes a 180 in the middle of the book, and it's a character I couldn't figure out why we were focusing on, and then it makes sense at the end why we're focusing on it. And then at the same time, it's about people who have impacted us and the promises we make to ourselves when we're younger. And so there's a lot more to it that honestly, this could probably do with a reread from me. I think there's elements, now that I've read it, that I missed the first time, like early on in the book when I was reading it. But I think it suffered from me thinking it was going to be one thing, and I was so headstrong about the fact that it was going to be this one thing, and the fact that it wasn't this one thing, I think I missed all of the other elements to it. And there's some deeper conversations with the main guy, and later on in his life when he's an adult with a girl that he's dating at the time. They have a lot of deep conversations, and I think that they didn't hit like they should have because I was so focused on the fact that I thought I knew how this book was going to end. I was so sold on it. I thought it was going to be this very specific thing, and it wasn't. And so I think that suffered from it. I do know that this, I believe, was a movie, and they've put it into a book. I still need to talk to my friend who's read this because there's so much that I'm missing. I know there are things that I'm missing from this book, but it didn't click. So the fact that the story just confused me the entire time I was reading it is why I gave it 3.5 stars, because there were elements of it that I did enjoy, but overall I was just so confused for most of this book. Mostly the second half of the book. I was just very confused on where we were going and what the point of it was. So now that I know where the story ended, or ends, kind of, I think it could do from me going back and seeing it again. I don't know. I feel like there's so much more to it that I didn't pick up on. And maybe I'm just really reading into wanting there to be more that I picked up on. But overall, my feelings were confusion. for most of this book. The next book that I ended up picking up was the 9th volume of Dreaming Sun by Ichigo Tagano. This one got 3.5 stars from me as well. This one is a very interesting experience for me because it's the book right before the very last book in the series, so they definitely had moments where you could tell that they were wrapping up this story. My biggest complaint with this series, which I've talked about so much recently in like the last few volumes when I've read this, is that the romance that they are focusing on right now is not one that I feel like is good. I have a lot of issues with that romance, and I kept hoping that it was going to change. And with it being the second to last volume, and I think one of you told me in one of my comments that the last volume is going to be disappointing to me based on my thoughts on it, I have come to terms with the fact that the romance I really don't want, that I've been hoping that they were going to change at the very last second, is not actually going to change. And so once I did that, once I kind of accepted the fact that this is the road that they are going down, I was able to actually enjoy this a little bit more than the past few. So again, maybe because I was so focused on what I wanted it to be, I wasn't really focusing on the story, and so I was letting my hatred towards one thing override the fact that I could enjoy other elements of it. This is, again, kind of wrapping up. We're coming to this big, like, culminating event that I think is going to end the entire series. And we kind of have a lot of, not goodbyes, but setting up to being like last times and last this and last that. And so because of that, because it had that, it did give that like, oh, we're getting close to the end kind of vibes. So I think that with it being so close to the end, the next volume is going to be very interesting because I have accepted where I think the romance elements of this book or this series are going. And once I've accepted that, maybe I'll enjoy it. Part of me still hopes that like there's going to be a switch at the very end because there's one person I want her to be with, and the fact that she is not with that person and has never been with that person is driving me nuts. But that is beside the point. I think because I let myself enjoy it, I enjoyed it more. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I still got 3.5 stars because it's still not where I want it to be. It's still just kind of okay. The first one was just so good. I can't believe that like it has like gone way downhill in my opinion. But I'm still excited for, you know, seeing how the story is going to end because I still really do like Shamana as a main character, seeing her come into her own. You really kind of, she is very, very, very naive and very like silly, if that's the right word for it, but she is also learning a lot about herself. She is finding her own people. She's finding her own way. She has friends that she didn't have at the very beginning of the series. So you have those elements. But there's just, so like her as a character is very fun to read about. I do enjoy her, but the journey of the romance was my biggest issue with this. And I think that we've, you know, come to terms with the fact that it is going to be the way that I don't want it to be, and that's okay. And now we can maybe go into the last volume a little bit more, kind of enjoying it a little bit more. The next book is one of my favorites from this month, and that is The Ranger by Monica McCarty, which is the third, I believe, we're at the third now, in the Highland Guard series. I gave this one 5 stars. This is my favorite one so far. I fell head over heels in love with this couple. I cannot get enough. So this one follows a guy named Arthur Ranger Campbell, and his kind of skill or gift is being very, very observant and being able to, he's got really good hearing, so he can hear things farther away than maybe other people can, and he has been sent on a mission to infiltrate this enemy camp. He's basically sent, he's kind of undercover. He's been undercover since the very first book, and very few people in the Highland Guard know that he's undercover. To them, he basically was bested at a trial within the Guard and then sent away. And so everyone thinks that once he was sent away, he joined the enemy forces. Only a couple of them know that he is there spying for them. And so he's with his brother, and his brother, who is not part of the Highland Guard, basically go to this guy who is the biggest enemy. He killed their father. Arthur has a lot of issues with him as a person, and so he's sent in as a spy to kind of get the lay of the land. He's kind of the last guy that's standing against Robert the Bruce. And so Arthur's kind of sent in to figure out how many soldiers he has, what's the lay of his land, all that kind of stuff that he can send back to Robert. But he discovers that one of the daughters of this guy that he cannot stand is someone that he ran into and has not been able to stop thinking about. Now she doesn't know who he is, but they have a very beautiful romance. It's like he struggles through most of this book because she's very attracted to him, he's very attracted to her, and he's got this very strong warrior, like forbidden love vibe to it because he knows that he can't have her. He knows that like it's his enemy's daughter, there's no way that he can want her, but he can't like tear himself away. And so their scenes are so beautiful, but at the same time he has like perfect golden retriever vibes because he would do anything for her. And so even though he wants to not want to be around her, he wants to like get away from her because he knows that he's falling for her, he can't stop himself from like protecting her and being there for her. So their romance is one of my favorites. Like it's my favorite in the series. Things, I know we're only 3 books in, but things have to be amazing for this to get blown out of the water because I just adored it so much. But it's definitely one of my favorite romances, historical romances, period. Like, it's not my favorite because that it will still always forever be Never Seduce Scott, but it is really high up there because I don't know why. All of their scenes were adorable. I tabbed the crap out of this book. I don't know if you can see it. I haven't tabbed a single book in this series yet. So I just really loved them, and I don't have a good reason to explain why they worked so well, but there's that whole like forbidden love, but they still can't fight their feelings for each other vibe that carries into a few other of the books that I have read this month, and I'm discovering that is a vibe that I like. If I know that it's going to be okay, like if it's forbidden love like Romeo and Juliet and I know it's not going to end well, that's a whole different thing. But if it's forbidden love in the sense of like something at the very last minute is going to get discovered and it'll be okay, I loved it. I loved them. They were great. And I can't wait to dive into the next one in the series because the first one was okay, but they've been getting better and better each book so far. So it gives me a lot of hope for the rest of the series, but there's also some like maybe magical realism elements to it. I'm not sure. There's some aspects about his quote-unquote abilities and powers that makes it seem fantastical in a sense, but I don't think it's actually fantastical. I just think that it's at a time where people would assume that those things that he can do was fantastical. He just has higher ability to perceive things than I think other people do. But yeah, I just love him. The next one that I picked up was a novella, and that is Beautiful Bitch by Christina Lauren. This is 1.5 in the Beautiful Bastards series. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. This is just a smutty novella, basically, which usually doesn't work for me, but this one did. I really enjoyed it, and I think it's because in the past when I've read smutty novellas, most of them, there's no backstory for our characters. They're just kind of like, the point of the novella is to see them have sex a bunch, and there's no backstory as to their chemistry or why they work and whatever it is. And because this is part of a series and we already have the pre-established relationship of our main 2 characters from the very first book, this one worked really well. Also, the first book ends really abruptly, and this has some scenes after the events that take place at the very end of that book. So you kind of see them having those conversations that we know they need to have, but the book ends before we can see them have it. So I liked seeing this. So we had those conversations, but it was also nice to see them being cute together. It definitely takes their relationship to the next level in this book. It follows Chloe and Bennett, who are the main characters in the very first book, Beautiful Bastards, which is this guy named Bennett Ryan, and they work at this Ryan Media Group, and Chloe is his assistant, and it's an office romance that takes a turn. It's very smutty. This is a very, very smutty book, so which is what this entire series is going to be like. But the series has 4 or 5 main books and then a bunch of novellas, and so I've been trying to collect them, but I was nervous because I didn't know how the novellas were going to work. Like, were they actually going to add to the plot? Were they just going to be there to like you know, give the readers an extra, like, here's an extra scene between the people you love, just for you, here you go. But I think based on what happens in this book is it does both. We see scenes that we as readers want to see between the characters that we have come to love, but we also see this add on to the story. Like I said, this takes their relationship to the next level, and I know that some of the novellas and some of the other books in the series that continue after this are going to, you know, kind of continue on from, you know, what happens here. Now, each main book in this series does follow a different couple, and we were introduced to them in this book. Well, we were introduced to one of them. One of them is the best friend of Chloe, who we know from the very first book. So we've already kind of known her, but we see some things in here that are going to set up the romance and like set up the situations as to where she finds herself in the second book. And then we were introduced to the main male love interest that's going to be in the second book in this one as well. So while this is pretty smutty, I mean, there's a good handful of scenes within this book, it does have other things to it. Like I said, it's got those conversations that we really wanted to see our characters have, but the book ended before we could, and kind of to see where their relationship goes, where their careers go, because it does have that question at the end of the first book of, you know, what's next for them. But now that I've read this one, I can continue on to the second one. There are, like I said, quite a few novellas. There's at least one novella between every single book, except for from books 2 to 3, there are 2 novellas between those. And I think one of them does follow these couples. So I like that we're going to be seeing them again. I like that they're going to be a big chunk of the book, but I'm interested to see where the series goes. I'm now invested in them, and I was very nervous going into this one because, like, it's obviously not big because it's a novella, but it is over 100 pages, I want to say. It's like 130 pages or so. So it does give you a good chunk of material, which I definitely enjoyed. And yeah, I loved it. I didn't know what to expect when I was going into it, but I'm very, very happy with it. Okay, the next 2 books I'm actually going to do together. I usually do these books in the order I've read them, so I actually read a book between these 2, but they're part of the same series, so it just makes sense to do them together. And that is Kingdom of the Wicked and Kingdom of the Cursed by Carrie Maniscalco. So these are going to be my new obsession. Right up there with Fortuna Sworn, ACOTAR, Crescent City. I love them. They both got 5 stars. I actually no, the first one got 4 stars. That's weird. They should both have gotten 5 stars. First one got 4 stars. Second one got 5 stars. I fell head over heels in love with this story. So the first book is definitely a YA book, and then once we get to the second book, that one is new adult. So I think the third one's also going to be new adult. I'm planning on reading that one in March, so I'll let you know for sure, but it definitely just continues. I don't know if you could tell, the second one's my favorite by the lack of sticky tabs that I put in the first book, but this series is a beautiful, beautiful, mysterious fantasy romance about our main character Amelia and basically a prince of hell. So it's not, I don't think it's a Hades and Persephone retelling, but it definitely gives Hades vibes to it because of the whole demon from hell kind of vibe. But our book basically starts with Amelia and her twin sister, and they have been raised, they're both witches, so they have magical powers, and they have been raised in a very strict household. They're in an Italian-like countryside, not countryside, but village, city, that kind of thing, and their parents and them and their grandmother own this restaurant. And the book really starts with Amelia basically discovering her sister's body, where her sister's heart's been cut out, and she is obviously distraught, and so she takes that and she dives into what happened. She is determined to figure out, you know, who did this, and in doing so she stumbles upon Wrath, who is one of the princes of hell. They're exactly what they sound like. They're all like the 7 deadly sins, so wrath, lust, gluttony, that kind of stuff, envy, things like that. And so he's the one that has kind of been sent to figure out what happened to these women as well. And so they strike up a bargain of sorts to help each other out and discover what's going on together. And then the second book happens, and this is my favorite in the series. There are so many good tension moments, and the romance and the sexual chemistry between Wrath and Amelia is impeccable. I am literally shocked by, I went into I read this book, right? Okay, first book in a series, read it, really enjoyed it, was very excited about the second one, went to go see how long the audiobook for my library was going to be, and it was going to be like 16 weeks. And I was like, well, that seems appropriate. I mean, it's very much my vibe to read the first book and not continue. And then within like a week, they said that my audiobook was available. I don't know what happened. I skipped the line or something, but like I was able to get the audiobook if I was able to read it in like 2 days. And I said, yes. So I went out and bought, this is a new book. I went out and bought the second book because I just know that I'm going to love this series based on how I felt and how sucked in I felt within the first book, which is interesting because it took me a while to get into this one. Like I was not really invested in it until I'd say about a fourth of the way through the book. That's when I really got invested and I really started to see the elements to it. This reminds me kind of the plot line and how these two people are discovering and kind of trying to figure out what's going on. It reminds me a lot of the plot from the first Crescent City book. So if you like Crescent City and you want maybe a less adult version of that, at least within the first book, I would highly recommend this because there's definitely like a lot of connection plot-wise between those two. But I fell head over heels for this couple. I fell head over heels for the story. I think it's fascinating. We see this character go from really, really, you know, maybe naive is not the right word, but naive and kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Sheltered. A naive and sheltered girl from the very first book to seeing her really take on the Prince of Wraths and go to a different place and really, I keep saying come into her own, but really come into her own because she, you know, is tired of doing what she has been told is the correct thing to do and she wants to do what she wants to do. And so you really see her do that. You see her take charge of her own life and make decisions for herself. But there's, again, this beautiful, like, twisty plot line behind all of it. Like, it's not just, I'm not just in love with it because of the romance. That's a very big part of the series, but I am in love with this world. I think that it's fascinating. I think the plot line is really interesting. And the second one ended on such a cliffhanger. I immediately went to my library to see if I could find the third audiobook, and I had to wait a while. I honestly thought I was gonna have to wait much longer, but I was able to get it relatively quickly, and I'm hoping to read the third book in the month of March. So this is a series that I thought nothing of going in. I didn't think I was going to have really any strong opinions about, and it's now taken over my life and is one of my new favorite fantasy romances. I'm really diving into the fantasy romance here lately, with the Fortuna Swan series taking over my life, rereading the ACOTAR series here soon with one of my friends, discovering this series that I honestly almost didn't read. I was not going to pick up this book, except for that it was part of one of the Patreon book clubs that I was a part of, and I decided that this year was going to be the year that I actually listened and did some of those books that were genuinely interesting to me, and they were reading this book, and I said, when am I going to get to this again? And I'm so happy I did, because clearly it's taken over my life. This is my favorite book of the month. It's probably going to be on my favorite lists at the end of the year. Like, a lot of the books that I'm reading right now are becoming favorites of mine. So that was there was a lot there, but I adore this series. I cannot wait to get to the third one. I have to wait until the end of the year before the third one comes out in paperback. So I can't get my hands on it yet, but I am going to read it soon, and I just know it's going to be great. Forgot to mention, but for this series, Trigger Warnings for like gore/blood magic, we do have that. I mean, I think that's very obvious by the synopsis of this, but there's a lot of that. The next book that I picked up was a Fairy Loot book that I've had for a hot second. Actually, before I show it to you, let me see what month we got this one. We got this one March of last year. So I'm reading it a year after I picked it up, and that is The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea by Axie O. This beautiful, beautiful Fairy Loot edition I'm obsessed with. I ended up giving this one 4.5 stars. I very much enjoyed this book. This is another one that I picked up for a Patreon book club that I would have never picked up before. Or not before, but I probably wouldn't have picked up anytime soon. It's giving me a lot of like middle grade vibes. It's not. It's YA, but if you like middle grade, it has middle grade vibes set in a YA setting. It's a book that I was interested in. I think there are elements to the synopsis that sound interesting, but it wasn't like top tier TBR. you know. And so the fact that she had this as her pick, I think was very good, because it made me pick it up much sooner than I ever would have picked it up. And I don't know why this is, but every time I pick up a Fairy Loot book, I am genuinely surprised by how much I enjoy it. There are very few subscription books that I have read. I have not read very many because I'm really bad at that, but there are very few subscription books that I have read and not loved. And this was just another one. I don't know why it surprises me. Maybe it's because those are books that I never pick out for myself, so some of them maybe sound like books I wouldn't really pick up, but every one that I've read so far, I've genuinely enjoyed. And it surprises me every time. I don't know why. But like I said, I gave this one 4.5 stars. This one is just so fun, and it also has like a nice little romance element to it as well, which, you know, guys, y'all know I love that part. Our main character, Mina, it kind of takes place mostly, not mostly, but it starts in her village, and they basically every single year there's this like prophecy, maybe myth, if you will, where the sea god, if you keep sacrificing a woman to the sea god to be his bride every year, one of these years he's going to pick one, and it's going to end whatever curse is on them. And so this year, Mina's brother's beloved is the one that's chosen for to be the bride. And so a last-ditch attempt to kind of save her brother and her family, she ends up jumping into the sea instead of this woman. And so she kind of sacrifices herself for her brother and the woman that her brother loves. And so it's a journey down into the world of spirits and ghosts and mythology and all that kind of stuff. And she discovers that the sea god's actually been asleep, and it's much more of a curse on him than really anyone ever thought. And so she ends up going on an adventure, finding some of the houses in the spirit realm to help her out. There's definitely a male love interest, if you will, who takes a big role in trying to help her, you know, figure some stuff out. And so it's so fun, and I loved it. I got sucked in. Something about this writing, it really sucks you in. I could vividly visualize, like, I'm pretty good, like I like to say I have a pretty decent imagination when it comes to reading and like seeing what I'm reading. I'm pretty good at that, but she has a way with it making it so much more detailed in my head than I could have ever made it myself, and I really enjoyed this. What I liked about this is, well, one of the things I liked about this, I like many things about this, but one of the things I liked about this is that this is a standalone. It's not very long, but a lot of the books that I feel like we're getting in Fairy Loot boxes are firsts in series, which are fine. I don't have a problem with that, but it's nice to get a standalone every once in a while and not get invested in another series on top of the already thousands of other series that I'm currently reading. And while this author has talked about possibly writing things in this world, it's not going to be connected series-wise. So I loved going in and knowing this was going to be a one-and-done thing, and just having the ability to have a standalone fantasy, which was really great. And I loved the characters. I loved the journey. I loved all of the spirits and all the ghosts and everybody else. And there was a bigger plot twist sort of thing. Not the big one that happens at the end, but like one before that I guessed pages before it happened, and I gasped it out loud. I think I was at work, so apologies to my office mate who probably looked over at me and was like, "Are you okay?" Because I gasped out loud. I got so emotionally invested in this story, and looking at this cover, which is a beautiful cover, but not one that I probably would have picked up. The synopsis is not something that I would have picked up on my own based on the synopsis. I'm so glad that I have it. I'm so glad that I do Fairy Loot, because I'm able to read books like this where something I would have never touched otherwise has become one that I very, very much enjoyed my time reading, and I will definitely recommend other people because I just thought it was so good. It was good, okay? It had a lot of elements that shouldn't have worked for me, but it did. I got emotional about that one. Oh my goodness. Okay, the next one that I picked up was the 4th volume of Spy Family by Tatsuo Endo. This is a series that I'm definitely enjoying. I liked this volume. I feel like we saw a lot more plot move in this one. The last volume I feel like was more of a character development one that kind of like set in stone the plot a little bit with the first 2 volumes, and so the third one was like kind of character development, and this one we get back to really moving the plot along, especially because we are the 4th one now in the series. There are, I think at this point, there are 11 out. I don't know if there's any more planned after that, but the 11th one did come out this year. So we're making our way through it. Like, we're closing in on the halfway point of what's out right now. So things have to start moving, and things did. This series basically follows this guy named Twilight who is a spy. And so he's been sent on a mission to infiltrate this private school. In order to do so, he's kind of created a family. So he's adopted a young girl, and he's found a woman, and they've had like an arranged marriage of sorts. And so the girl is a telepath, and so she knows what her dad is planning. She understands that he is a spy, and she's trying to do her best to help him out because she is very, very key to this plan. One of her classmates is very, very popular, and they do not get along, but he is the son of kind of the target of Twilight's mission, and so she's trying her best to be what she needs to be. And then also, which she knows obviously because she can read minds, but her father character, Twilight, does not know that the woman that they have picked as the mom is actually an assassin. And so we have that. But in this book, as you can probably tell by the cover, we get a new family member, which is this fun dog who has special abilities himself, because of course they do. No one in this family can be a part of this family without having some sort of special ability. But we see the plot as far as the mission really start to kick off in this one, and we see, you know, our characters start to do things that are going to help this plot along. So I am so interested in what the next volume is going to be. I don't think I have it planned on any of my TBRs, but I'll see if I can squeeze one in this month. I really am enjoying my time with this one, and I think not leaving so much time between installments is better for me because it keeps the momentum of the series going. And I'm just so invested in this series, especially the young girl. She is adorable, and I just want the best for her, and she's just trying to do what's right for her family and do what her father wants her to, you know, her do, and not let him know that she can tell exactly what he's doing. So there's just a lot to it that I very much have enjoyed. And so I think I forgot to tell you, but I gave this one 4 stars. So I am very much enjoying the installments as we get through them, and I'm excited to see what's next. The next 3 are all going to be done together because they're part of the same series, and that was the series that I started a new vlog series for here on my channel, which is Simplify My Series, which is hopefully to help me do exactly that, take my series and actually get through them. So I read the 3 books that are currently out in the Entangled With Fae series by Tessania Odette. So we started with Heart of a Raven Prince, which is a Cinderella retelling. We have A Kiss of the Selkie, which is a Little Mermaid retelling, and A Taste of Poison, which is a Snow Bright retelling. So Heart of the Raven Prince ended up getting 3 stars, 3.5 stars. Kiss of a Selkie got 4, and Taste of Poison got 4.5. So that one was my favorite one by far. These are all new adult happily ever after stories that take place in the same world. The first one in the series was called The Curse of a Wolf King. Wolf King? Yeah, Wolf King. And that was a Beauty and the Beast retelling. And I really enjoyed that one, and that's kind of why I've started collecting these. Now, the series is not over. I started the video thinking that the series was going to be over, or I started planning the video thinking that the series was going to be over, but she has now announced that there is at least, I think she's planned a couple of more. There's one more coming out later this year, but I'm at least caught up as far as I can right now. All standalones, you don't have to read them in any order. You can pick and choose which ones are interesting to you, but I really enjoyed my time reading this one. The Raven Prince was my least favorite, obviously, by the rating, and I think that was just elements of the Cinderella story didn't work for me as well as the other ones. So I will leave my vlog linked above if you'd like to check it out, but basically it takes place in this world called Fairway, where there are Fae, and they are, basically there was this big war many years before, and they have different courts, and within different courts you've got different people. And so our first book takes place in the Lunar Court, and it's between a Fae prince and a half Fae woman. And then we have Kiss of a Selkie, which takes place between a mortal man and a Fae princess. And then Taste of Poison takes place between a Fae hunter and a half Fae princess of sorts. Again, my favorite one. I love this one. The tension in this one was amazing, but Kiss of a Selkie and Taste of Poison were my 2 favorites. She has a really beautiful way of taking these stories and making you care about our characters, and basically, I don't even know how to explain it. Like, they are the romances are very, very quick in these books because, again, they're kind of one and done stories. They aren't crazy long, so you do need to get through the stories relatively quickly, but they do have, you know, like, they have a lot of very quick, all of our characters come to fall in love very, very quick. So some elements of them are not as believable as other romances, but there are other elements that I really enjoyed. But I really enjoyed my time reading them. I'm really glad that I went through them. Again, these are standalones, so you do not have to read them in any order. I just chose to read them that way. So maybe don't binge them like I did, because I think that some of my enjoyment from the earlier ones didn't work so well. But I very much enjoyed them. These are the beautiful editions that actually the author herself has created all of the covers, and then under each dust jacket is a beautiful illustration as well, and each one hinted at the next one. We saw at least one of the two main characters from the next book show up in this book, and then there's a lot of epilogues to all of them as well, where we get to see some of the characters that we've come. Like our main characters couple within Heart of the Raven Prince was in the epilogue of Kiss of a Selkie, and you know, our main character from Kiss of a Selkie showed up in this one, and so we kind of have seen the next couple of characters, and I'm very excited to see where the series goes. But they're fairy tale retellings that I very much enjoyed. If you want like one and done fantasy romances that aren't too steamy, this is your series. Let's say about trigger warnings. So Heart of a Raven Prince has some familial abuse, mostly emotional. If it's physical, I think it's all historical. You don't really see it on the page. There's not really anything for Kiss of a Selkie, but A Taste of Poison deals with drug abuse and drug overdose and things of that nature, as well as grief of a family member. So, and using said drugs for your grief. So there's a lot of harder hitting topics within this one. I think if any of them were adult, I would say that they're all new adult, but this one is the most adult of those, if that makes any sense. The next book I picked up was my middle grade for the month, and that is the third book in the Percy Jackson series, which is The Titan's Curse by Rick Riordan. We've made it halfway through the series, and I really enjoyed this one. I ended up giving this one 4 stars, which I was honestly kind of nervous going into it based on my opinions or my feelings when I read the second book. I felt like the second book had a lot of elements that weren't clicking with me and didn't really work. And then I noticed, actually, I was going through the entire series because my copies are these newer ones, so if you lay them out on the floor, it creates like one giant picture. So I was having fun doing that, and then I realized the second book is the shortest one by a pretty decent size, so there wasn't a lot to get invested in, which made me feel a little bit better. But this book brought my enjoyment way back up. I remembered why I liked the first one so much. We have a lot more plot within this one. There were some elements that I would say is predictable, but I also have to remind myself that I am not the target audience for this one. So some of the like reveals at the end, I guessed within the first few chapters of the book, but someone reading it who A, probably didn't have any knowledge of Greek mythology, and B, is younger, probably wouldn't have picked up on them as quickly. Some of them might have if you knew Greek mythology, but there are some elements that like I definitely had the benefit of knowing those things or being a little bit older and that kind of thing. So I had to, you know, kind of be aware that I'm not the target audience. Again, I'll say just like I did with the last one, I'm not sure I can give any of these 5 stars because people who my age who are reading these books grew up with them and read them the first time. So me reading them for the first time now is, take my opinions with a grain of salt, because I, again, am not the target audience, not the target demographic for these series, and B, didn't grow up with these. So there's definitely some elements of these stories that maybe don't sit right, aren't as enjoyable for me, but again, I have some circumstances that would, you know, be a little bit different than the normal person reading these books. But I loved all of the Greek mythology. I love it every single time I dive in. All of the elements of things that I remember, seeing all the Greek gods and seeing all these monsters that like are people and stories that click. There's definitely some myths in here that we're seeing again, at least for me, like myths that I have known, since I've studied Greek mythology. So that's really fun. The 4th one that I'm currently reading is the same way. So we're getting those elements again, and it's not like the second book where it was just straight up ripped out of that, and it feels like, yes, there's the original there, but it is reimagined in some way for our characters to have like an adventure. So I really enjoyed this one. I am definitely getting invested in this now, so I enjoyed this way more. I went in so scared, and I'm so glad that it ended up being okay. And the last book of the month is also the very last book for my Tessa Dare buddy read. We've come to the end. We've made it to the very last book, and that is Say Yes to the Marques by Tessa Dare. This is actually the second book in the Castles Ever After series, but that's one of her series that is just companion. I mean, all of her series are companion, but they do have an order that leads from one to the other. This one, none of the characters have to do with each other. It just has to deal with them being set in different castles. And so this one follows Cleo, and Cleo has been engaged to this guy named Piers for 8 years, and she is very done with it. She is much older. They got engaged when she was like super young, like I think 15, maybe younger than that. And so she has waited and waited and waited, and he's stayed away, or there's been one reason why they haven't gotten married, that kind of stuff. So he's a lord, and so she basically wants to annul the engagement. And so she comes to his brother, who is named Rafe, who is a prize fighter boxer, and he has lots of reasons why he wants her to marry his brother. And so he basically shows up at this castle that she has recently inherited and helps her plan the wedding that she doesn't want. There's like a bargain that they make where like if she does wedding stuff for about a week and still doesn't want to get married at the end of it, then he will sign the papers and release her from this engagement with his brother. And his brother's supposed to show up in a few weeks finally, and everyone's hoping that finally they'll get married. But they've been engaged for 8 years. That's a long time. And so she's fed up, and I honestly understand. But there are secrets, obviously, because Rafe has feelings towards Cleo and vice versa. So there's a lot more to it than that. I ended up giving this one 4.5 stars. There was something that wouldn't let me quite give it a full 5-star, but I really enjoyed this story. I loved going back into this. I'm glad that we ended our buddy read with some of the newer books that she has written, because this is not her newest series, but it's her one right before her newest series. And it goes back to the Tessa Dare that I fell in love with originally. I love her writing. I think she's very funny. I love all the situations our characters get in. They're so swoony. I loved Rafe and Cleo. I thought they were so cute. I also loved their relationship, and, you know, how Cleo is basically taking care of herself. And again, my favorite words, coming into her own, and, you know, taking what she wants from life and doing that. Like, she has inherited this castle, and she's not going to give it up. She doesn't want to get married. She doesn't want to give it to her husband. She wants to actually start a brewery, and that's unheard of. And then she's also got some family members who are a little tough. So I would say trigger warnings for fat phobia within this book. Her family does not treat her well because she's not a stick, and there are a lot of elements that I just want to throw different characters out the window. So just be wary of that, if that is something that is triggering to you. But I just loved their relationship. I thought their relationship was really, really sweet, super swoony. I got invested very, very quickly. I was very believable as well, which has been an issue for some of her past early stuff. I felt like was not as believable, and I really loved it. So I'm so glad we ended this buddy read on a very uplifting note. We will be reading other books by different authors in the future. It's not going away. We're just done with Tessa Dare finally. So I'm excited to see what new things Tessa Dare has. I know she's got a new book that's supposed to be coming out. Well, it's supposed to come out at the beginning of this year, and now I think it's coming out at the beginning of next year. So maybe one day we'll get it. But I'm excited to see what other things this author has in store. But as far as all of her full-length historical romances, we have read those, and it feels like such an accomplishment, because this has been like 2 years running that we've been reading these books. So I'm excited to see next steps, but sad to see Tessa Dare go, but what a great one to end on. And that's it. That is all of the books that I read in the month of March. I hope you guys enjoyed. As always, let me know all your thoughts down below if you've read any of the books that I mentioned. If there's any of the vlogs that you haven't seen that sound interesting, I'll link them down below as well. or if there's something in the month of March that you read and really enjoyed or hated, need to rant about, want to rave about, let me know all of your fun bookish thoughts down below. But if you like this video, and I very much hope that you did, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe down below if you'd like to be part of this awesome growing family. I've also got all my social media down there, as well as other fun bookish links, so check all that out, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!